Hey everybody, welcome into Roll Title, the Alabama Championship Special. I'm Hannah Chalker alongside Mike Johnson, captain on the 2009 National Championship team with Alabama, is also a former All-American. We are only 2 days away now from the big day on Monday, and Mike, this is our third show, so 3 out of 4. We've got one more show tomorrow at 1 o'clock, and you said your anxiety level was going to keep rising as we get closer.
Yes.
What's it at today?
It was pretty high last night, or yesterday when we were getting on the show, and when I woke up this morning, it was even higher. I'm telling you right now, just there's something about being in the city of Atlanta and being around Georgia fans, obviously all year long, that it's like these two. You're on a huge collision course, and now everything's starting to come together. And it's not just for a game; it's for the national title game. And I think a lot of Alabama fans feel the same way. That such an anticipation, and it'll continue to grow, obviously, until Monday night.
Well, if you joined us yesterday for the show, we told you that Alabama was arriving last night around 7 p.m. Eastern time at the Atlanta airport. Well, they're here, guys. The Tide has officially arrived. Our very own Chris Kirschner was there to capture this video. Cold night, but a lot of fans were there to support. Mike, you've been in this position. What's it like getting off the plane with the fans cheering for you?
Yeah, it was a little bit probably cooler for me than it is these people. I mean, these players have been in the semifinal 4 years in a row, the national title game 3 years in a row now, and they've seen this type of thing before. This is the red carpet has been rolled out, especially there at Hartsfield-Jackson. When you talk about them entering Atlanta, that's also nothing new for these Alabama players. And so, in 2009, it was our first appearance in a long time in a national title game. So kind of getting off that bus, seeing some of the Alabama fans, getting welcomed back to Tuscaloosa after that game was over. That's why you go to places like Alabama and Georgia, because of the fanfare, and obviously you see it there on display right in front of the team.
Well, very busy day for the team. Today they had a media day. They have practice around 2:40 p.m. Eastern time in the Mercedes-Benz Stadium, and we'll try to have some practice footage up for you shortly after that, so look out for that right here on SEC Country. And we want to get you guys involved too, so as always, send us your questions and comments. I see some people are rolling in here. Jeremy Scott says Roll Tide. Wanda Stuck, Roll Tide. She says Bama has this. Classy Coas is here, RTR. So you guys go ahead and get your comments and questions in. We'll get to those a little bit later in the show, and if I miss your question, just keep posting it until we see it.
I love the comment here from Michael Wayne Wilson. He says, we got this, won't be a blowout, but after the first half they make their changes, it's going to take off. I think that's a big part of this game, the second half adjustments that you're going to see from both these teams, because both these head coaches know each other so well, so there's going to be some second half adjustments. I think that's a big key to this game as well. We've
got a really cool show coming up for you. We actually have interviews from Media Day from those Alabama players, and later in the show we're going to do a scouting report of our own. Mike Johnson's going to break down some crucial elements of this game, including a defensive strategy for both teams.
Yeah.
But if you're just joining us, this is Roll Title. I'm Hannah Chalker alongside Mike Johnson, the Alabama Championship Special here on Alabama's SEC Country. As the Tide prepares for its title clash against Georgia, we'll be bringing you the most complete coverage of the Tide available anywhere. From the moments that defined the season to interviews with Tide players and coaches, we'll be here all week long. And we have been here all week long. This is show number 3 of 4. We have one more tomorrow at 1 o'clock. That's going to be a good one. We'll have footage from practice, so you'll want to join us there. All right, well, let's get into the thick of things here. Our very own Chris Kirschner and Mark Burnett, they're our SEC Country reporters for Alabama, were at Phillips Arena today. This was like in just an hour ago that they got these fresh interviews from the players. And a lot of these Alabama players are seasoned vets now. They've been around national championships, but not for one. That's freshman wide receiver Henry Ruggs III. This is his first media day for a national championship. Let's hear what he had to say.
Just great being on the ground, great group of guys, learning the game of college football, and just to be a part of this team is just a great feeling.
What's sort of been the biggest eye-opening moment in terms of making that transition from high school to college?
I say fall camp. It kind of that was one of the biggest challenges that I had to face coming into the season.
We see you making plays on offense, special teams. How does it feel to have the coaching staff put so much trust in you?
Well, it just feels good. I come out and work hard every day to gain their trust, and now that they trust me, it's just I'm happy for it.
How did it feel to be so embraced by the older guys and not necessarily feeling like you're taking their spots? Everybody's sort of embracing you and the other young receivers.
Well, we're a team, so everybody looks for the coach is going to do their best to help us win, and it pays off. So everybody just bought into the program, and whoever plays, and we're all for each other. We're a team.
I'm sure you probably know a few of these Georgia guys from seeing them in recruiting camps and stuff like that. What are you expecting in this game on Monday night?
Well, I'm just expecting a great football game. It's a championship, so everybody's going to go out and give it their all.
Mike, when he mentioned fall camp, you kind of winced. You remember that?
Yeah, absolutely. That's I got to tell you that's definitely the biggest transition for me. You go, I mean, fall camp in high school is what it is. You're getting ready for classes. Everybody's got their own. I mean, you're 16, 17 years old. Well, when you show up on campus at a place like Alabama, that is business time. I mean, that is where things really get going for some of these true freshmen. So when he said that, I kind of chuckled to myself. And he remembers back 5 months ago when he got into that first fall camp. That is definitely a huge transition point.
But in all seriousness, Ruggs seemed to say that the team is all bought. They're all bought in.
Yeah, I thought he did a good job in the interview. And listen, Henry Ruggs is one of those guys who has become a force for Alabama this year. When you talk about, I mean, I think his first 5 catches at Alabama were touchdown grabs. He's a huge red zone threat. They use him over the top a little bit to get big gainers. You saw a big touchdown. A big catch against LSU, 47-yarder. He's been invaluable in a lot of different ways. He's had a couple of explosive kick returns last week, and I think that you see that mindset start to come out when you hear him in interviews like that. He talks about team first. He talks about how we're kind of a family when we're all getting together, and right now they're just focused on the national title game. That's why he's had so much success, because he does have that laser focus that all the older guys, all the coaches like Coach Saban, even Scott Cochran have gotten younger guys like this to buy into the system. And that's why you see so many freshmen on the field for Alabama.
And you see that closeness on the field as well, not only just hanging out, but they've been playing amazing on defense. I mean, that performance against Clemson was outstanding. Junior defensive lineman Isaiah Buggs has a lot to say about that as well.
We just knew what we had to come out and do and prove to the world who Alabama really is. That's the main thing.
How do you carry that over into this game?
We keep our same poise, we keep our attitude, and we just play each play at a time. As long as we execute, we'll be all right.
The defensive line was really big. You guys never had to walk a safety down. How do you sort of get that same effort out of you guys?
All week, ever since we lost to Auburn, they pressured us to be better up front, D-line, control the line of scrimmage all throughout the whole game for 60 minutes, and that's what we were able to do.
I know it's a team game, obviously, but are you guys kind of having fun competing to see who can get the quarterback first?
Yeah, we always talk about who get the first sack and who get the most sacks. That's just competition between us, each other up front, to help each other go harder each and every day and each and every game.
How far have you come as a player? I've seen a lot of people saying you played your best game of the year in that last game.
The coaches challenge me every day to be the best player I can be, and I just try to be the best player I can be for this team.
Mike, what Buggs was saying about having to be so up for the Clemson game, how tough is that to have a 6-day turnaround to avoid a letdown against Georgia?
Yeah, well, I think that obviously a lot of guys in the situation, this is Buggs' first trip to a college football title game. He was a junior college transfer, so he's a guy who's come in and been a huge part of what they're trying to do up front on the defensive line. But the turnaround is a big deal. When you talk about a team that was incredibly prepared for that Clemson game, nothing really catching them off guard. When you talk about misdirections, eye candy, guys like Isaiah Buggs, Raekwon Davis, they were all over it last week. And so I think the biggest thing for them right now is to get back in that film room, make sure you're just as prepared for this game. And there's a lot shorter of a time crunch when you talk about getting in that film room and seeing things like that. But guys like Isaiah Buggs, I mean, he's coming to this program and really taking the bull by the horns. He is the prototypical defensive lineman for Alabama, has so much explosion in the hips, and he was a force last week. I think he had his best game in the Sugar Bowl last week, got a sack, a couple of tackles for loss. He was always in the backfield, and I think you're going to have to see a lot of the same things from him this weekend when he goes against another tough Georgia offensive line.
So how does Alabama maintain that focus in injury? Well, junior defensive back Ronnie Harrison answers that question.
Just come out with the same focus, just be prepared. It's the national championship, so I mean, you're gonna have some energy or whatever, so just try to come out and be amped up for the game.
What did you see from your defensive line in that game?
They played well, they were aggressive. They made a lot of plays, they flew around, they hit the quarterback hard, so I think they played a great game overall.
What do you see when a guy like Deron Payne's able to make an interception and also get a touchdown?
You're just excited for him, big guy catching the interception and being able to run with it, and then him scoring a touchdown on offense, you're just happy for him.
What does a guy like Tony Brown bring to this defense?
He just brings aggression, type of attitude, that Bama defense has, he just comes with energy, he has everybody amped up, the whole game, so we just appreciate that.
What are you guys looking forward to in terms of trying to stop the game?
We're just going to do our best to stop it. They got 2 great running backs. They're both veterans, they're great runners, so we're just going to try to slow them down as best as we can.
So Ronnie Harrison says energy, that's the key to the game and staying up on defense. Hey guys, we want to hear from you too. What do you think about these interviews? Give us your questions and comments as well, and we'll get to those as soon as possible. We've got a lot of people showing up here in our Facebook Live, so thanks everybody for joining us. We just listened to what Ronnie Harrison had to say about staying up for Georgia. And you know, a lot of people talk about Minkah Fitzpatrick, and Ronnie Harrison's kind of the forgotten guy back there in the backfield. I mean, like, what? He's so good though. He's a key position of the defense.
Yeah, he's the silent assassin. He's the enforcer of this defense back there in the secondary. And you hear a lot about Minkah, and you see a lot of interviews from guys like Tony Brown last weekend. But Ronnie Harrison has been a stalwart. I mean, he has been a guy that is as physical at the safety position as you're going to see in a long time. I think he kind of plays back there like a free safety version of maybe Earl Thomas from the NFL. I mean, he's flying around making plays. He's physical. He's making big hits. He's taking balls away. I think you saw in the LSU game. He's absolutely intercepting passes and making sure that he's in on all these plays. He's been one of those guys, like I said, you don't hear a lot about. But you know, with the younger guys playing, with guys like Tony Brown playing, or Deontay Thompson back there who had to step into a big role last week, he keeps everybody in line. And I think that the opposing team, it's not just about Minkah. They also know where Ronnie's at all times, because he is a playmaker. He has a ton of speed, and he's relentless. He is a Nick Saban style of safety, and I think that's what makes him so good.
Well, another key to the game, of course, is stopping the Georgia run game. Swift, Michelle, Chubb, three-headed monster back there. Senior defensive lineman Josh Frazier, we got to catch up with him. He had such high praise for these guys. Here's what he had to say.
You know, Nick Chubb, in my opinion, I thought it was better than Leonard Fournette. You know, the way he ran the ball, if he hadn't got hurt, you know, he had that little record of 100 yards, you know, per rushing, like per game or something like that little record. So, and then Sony Michel just complements his game really well. So, and they're both really good backs. And then they had that freshman, Swift. So they got three really good running backs, but I feel like we go against the best backs in the country every day, you know.
How does that help you guys getting ready for this game, battling guys like Damian Bowe, Josh Jacobs?
Well, I feel like a lot of my game, you know, our thing with Alabama is stopping the run. So you really got to develop striking blockers and get knocked back in the backfield, and that's what I try to do every day, and it's really helped me with my run game. And the thing with that is I've gone against Derrick Henry, you know, T.J. Yeldon, all the past Bama greats. So just going against all these different types of styles of backs has really helped me, you know, with my game and just, you know, what they like to do, whether like the two-gap cut, you know what I'm saying, jump in different gaps and stuff like that. So it really helps with, you know, I feel like Nick Chubb kind of reminds me of Josh Jacobs a little bit. You know, he's shifty, he's quick, you know what I'm saying, he can make people miss, you know what I'm saying, so.
He said Chubb's better than Leonard Fournette. Do you agree with that?
I do, in a lot of different instances. I think that there's a reason to look at it like that. I think Fournette is one of those guys, it's like a bowling ball. I mean, once you get him going downhill, nobody wants to tackle him. You can do tall sweeps, you can do these inside zones. If he gets a second level, you don't want to step in front of Leonard Fournette. Nick Chubb is one of those guys that you can put up to the line, some of those inside zone schemes where he can get into one gap, and his lateral quickness really is what separates him in terms of, you know, being a little bit better than Leonard Fournette in my book. I mean, Leonard Fournette has all the intangibles. I mean, he has all the size, the speed, and everything else, but the ability to move laterally, go in and out of holes, get from the A gap to the A gap to the B gap, that is very tough to defend, and that's one of the reasons he's had so much success at Georgia, is because in this inside zone running scheme that Jim Chaney has put out there for Georgia this year, you can really kind of pick your hole right now, and Nick Chubb is so quick to the point and so quick to accelerate that he really has racked up a ton of good numbers.
We're going to break down that more in just a second, but we want to get to your questions and comments now, so start bringing in the questions. And we have one from Ryan Wright who says, how's Fitzpatrick's health for this game? He has been banged up a little bit this season.
Yeah, I thought it was good to see him step in front of a camera and be like, you know what, I've got two kidneys, they're both working really well. There's been reports all week about you know, whether or not he had a bruised kidney or maybe bruised ribs, and I think he was up in Birmingham maybe earlier in the week getting checked out by some of the doctors. But from all reports that we've seen, and from Fitzpatrick's mouth himself this morning, saying he's feeling really good and he will be on the field and be his 100% self as always.
And Ryan Wright has an early prediction, Bama 24, Georgia 13. You like that?
I'm right there along those lines. I think it's Bama 24, maybe Georgia 17. I think it's tough. I think this is really a game that comes down to special teams and punting and being able to convert on third downs. And so I think that it could go either way, but I think that you're going to have to see how the game plays along and where these teams are at on the field and who wants to take those risks on fourth down. I think they're really, really equally talented teams.
We're going to really get into predictions on tomorrow's show at 1 o'clock, so join us back for that. We want to hear from your predictions as well. All right, if you guys are just now joining us, this is Roll Title, the Alabama Championship Special right here on SEC Country. As the Tide prepares for its title clash against Georgia, we'll be bringing you the most complete coverage of the Crimson Tide available anywhere. From the moments that defined the season to interviews with Tide players and coaches, we'll be here all week long. And guys, if you just are joining us, you're going to have to rewind as soon as we get off live, because we just had 4 awesome interviews from our very own Chris Kirschner and Mark Burnett. They were there at Phillips Arena for Media Day today, and those were really fun interviews. We're going to try to get those posted individually as well. Well, we heard from those players about what they thought about Georgia. Well, let's do a scouting report of our own, and let's start right there where we picked up with Chubb, Michelle, Swift, stopping them. That's going to be a key to this game. And Mike, how well is Alabama's defense prepared for how Georgia's offense changes with which running back is there? Because they mix it up. They do different things.
I think that Jim Chaney has done a good job of using different skill sets. And I think that if you had to map it out, Nick Chubb is your inside zone guy. Like I said a minute ago, he's bouncing from gap to gap. He can kind of Le'Veon Bell style almost, kind of stick his head in one gap, bounce laterally, and get up the field before you even know he's there. Sonny Michel, I think that his natural ability, I think it's toss sweeps, I think it's speed, I think it's some of the exterior runs, the stretches, being able to get up the field and really have breakaway runs. That's what's made him so dangerous. And DeAndre Swift, you kind of have a third down guy with a lot of speed. I mean, Swift is a good name for him. He's a guy that can catch passes out of the backfield. I think he leads the running backs in passes caught. So he's an explosive guy in his own right. But I think Jim Chaney has done a good job of trying to go against the grain with a lot of these guys. Sonny Michel has had some good runs inside the tackles where you almost think Nick Chubb is going to come out. I do think there is a perception from the Alabama defense where you can turn on the field and the film, and you can watch in certain situations. They just trust a guy like Nick Chubb maybe a little bit more. Maybe in certain situations they trust Sonny Michel a little bit more. So they've done a good job of mixing things up. But you have to know when each of these guys is in the game. Like I said, Swift will be in the backfield, and if he's in on third down, you can look for maybe a flare screen to him or a pass out of the backfield, and he's a guy that can make you hurt if he's able to get the ball in his hand. So they will be being keyed. I know the linebackers will be able to communicate those things. It's a big deal that Mack Wilson is back in this Alabama football uniform and playing in this game, and I know that he will have all the communication you need with which one of these guys in the backfield and what the biggest threat is in each situation.
Well, those running backs are going to try to take some of the pressure off Jake Fromm, who hasn't been asked to do a whole lot in the passing game this year. What have you seen from Jake Fromm as a passer?
Well, I think he's extremely accurate. I don't want to say cautious is probably not the right word, but he's not going to throw into a ton of coverage. Kirby Smart has been in his ear, and he has almost patented him the way that that Jalen Hurts is playing. We have a strong defense. We have a strong running game. Don't do anything crazy in the passing game, especially with a true freshman. And I think that Jake Fromm has done a good job of that. He's a guy you can tell is well versed in what he's going to face. He knows what the defense is going to give him. He's kind of a first read, second read kind of guy, and he's getting the ball out of his hands. And when he does, you can look for these crossing routes. You can look for the play action passes. He's going to be throwing to some explosive wide receivers, and I think it's up to Alabama's defensive line to try to get in his face. Don't let Jake Fromm get into rhythm. I think if you let him sit back there and go through his reads and get his feet set, that's when he's extremely dangerous, extremely accurate. That's the reason Kelly Bryant did not fare well last week, is that a lot of the Alabama defense linemen were in the backfield from play to play, and so I think that still has to be a very similar blueprint. You don't have Anthony Jennings this week, but a lot of those guys, Terrell Lewis, Christian Miller, Isaiah Buggs, who we just showed, I think that you have to have them in the backfield getting in Jake Fromm's face early and often and making him uncomfortable.
It's absolute blasphemy to me that people are comparing Jake Fromm and saying that he's better than Hurts. He is a freshman. He's super young. What have you seen out of him and his ability as a freshman to be able to read defenses, to make adjustments at the line of scrimmage? I mean, the Alabama defense is a whole other beast.
Well, I think you have to give Jim Chaney credit. He knew what he had starting off the season. He knew that Jake Fromm was a guy that was level-headed, could be a good leader, but they've kind of eased him along. Early off in the year, they used a lot of the running game. You didn't see a lot of explosive pass plays, specifically in the Notre Dame game and some of the early games they did play in SEC play, but as the season has gone on, they've understood that they needed to make changes in the way they approached the line of scrimmage. You saw his completion percentage start to go up. You've seen Jake Fromm, as they face tougher teams along the defensive line, get the ball out of his hands, allow the running backs to make plays. The crossing route, to me, is what really becomes Jake Fromm's best friend. The guys they have in the slot and the running backs out of the backfield have really done a good job this year of making separation crossing the field, and that's a throw he's comfortable with. He's also been very good at back shoulder throws. I mean, allowing his playmakers to make plays. That's what Alabama's Alabama's going to be tasked with at the defensive back position. And so just getting him uncomfortable, like I said, is a huge key this week.
Well, let's talk about Fromm's downfield threats. And Javon Wims is to Georgia what Calvin Ridley is to Alabama. He's their main red zone threat. How effective has he been all season long?
He's been great. I think you see a guy that's a longer body, can definitely make the adjustments in the air. I mean, that's what makes him so deadly as a Georgia wide receiver, is that, some of the throws that Jake Fromm has learned to make to the back shoulder, specifically to Wims, they're just indefensible. You can't do anything about some of the things that are going on. And so you have to do your best to try to measure up what Wims is going to do. But the fact that he's long, the fact that he's fast, the fact that he knows the back shoulder throws and has worked with Jake Fromm all year, it's an extremely deadly combination. He's a guy that I would expect somebody like Minkah Fitzpatrick to be lined up with a ton in this game. Possibly even Tony Brown, with the link that Tony Brown has in that secondary as well. So you have to have your eyes on a guy like that at all times. He really is that big-time playmaker that has developed through the season for Georgia. You don't hear a lot about Georgia's wide receivers next to their running backs, but Wims is definitely the chub of that group.
Yeah, Wims, big-bodied, good hands. You think back to the touchdown against Oklahoma where he just completely out-fought the defense, and then the touchdown against Florida where he out-jumped a defender. What is his matchup with Minkah Fitzpatrick? Is he going to be able to out-fight and out-jump Minkah?
Yeah, he's such a physical wide receiver that you wonder what that matchup will be like. I think that Minkah a lot of times will be matched up on a guy like that. I think they're going to have to do a good job of maybe stacking wide receivers, allowing some of these guys to get releases off the line of scrimmage. I think you also see, I mentioned earlier, Tony Brown is a guy who has length, did play an incredibly a well-coached game in the Sugar Bowl against Clemson and didn't allow many of those plays. And so both of those guys, I think that both of those guys probably match up favorably. I think that Jim Chaney probably knows that and will do whatever he can to kind of get these guys to where you're putting them in motion, maybe getting a little mixed up in coverage and seeing if he can get Wims released off the line of scrimmage.
Besides Javon Wims, Georgia does have senior Terry Godwin, freshman Mecole Hardman, both 5-star recruits. What threat do they pose to Alabama?
Yeah, Mecole Hardman's a guy that Alabama was after on the recruiting trail. He has a ton of speed. I think you're going to see him. Obviously, he's been a big part of special teams this year for Georgia, but he's one of those guys that you'll see streaking. I mean, he really will be burning up the sideline. He'll be running some of the 9 routes. He's the guy that kind of takes the top off the defense. The guy that, somebody like Ronnie Harrison, who we saw earlier, is going to be having to turn and chase a lot of times with the way he's running his routes. And so he becomes an incredibly big part of the passing game, not only with just statistics and ability to take the top off defenses, but to clear other people out and allow some of those underneath crossing routes like I just talked about to be a big part of this game. And those crossing routes, a lot of them are going to go to Terry Godwin. Terry Godwin knows how to get open and knows how to break away from some of these defenders. And so once you put those 3 guys together, it's like puzzle pieces for Jim Chaney. I mean, really, he has to fit them all together and find out where they fit best against where the Alabama defenders are playing. And if they can find the right combination in specific situations, they will have a pretty good day.
All right, let's switch over to the other side of the ball and talk about the defense. We know who Georgia's stars are on defense: Roquan Smith, Dominic Sanders. What is the strategy to get through these guys? Yeah,
it's going to be tough. One thing that we've seen Alabama be able to do a lot on the national stage is just run at people. You saw it last week against Clemson. They're able to have Damian Harris and Bo Scarborough up the middle that are just grinding people down. I don't know that that's an option a lot in this game. I think that when you see Roquan Smith, he's so good at not only being downhill, but running sideline to sideline. So I think that Alabama comes in this game, you probably see a little bit of misdirection. And the one reason that you really feel good about Alabama in some areas is because they do have a quarterback that can rip off long gains. He is a running back playing the quarterback position. So see if you can get Roquan Smith to follow Damian Harris, to follow Bo Scarborough, then maybe keep one of these balls around the end for Jalen Hurts. Doesn't want to do it every snap. Obviously a lot of these linebackers are smart. They will be keying on a guy like Jalen Hurts, but the misdirection for me is a huge check mark in Alabama's direction, where you can get the linebackers off balance a little bit, allow this defensive line to kind of flow, and then all of a sudden you're going a different direction. Double screens, tunnel screens, quarterback draws. I think you'll see all those things come out in Brian Daboll's game plan, and that's what's going to make it so tough on Roquan Smith and all the other defenders for Georgia.
And much like Alabama wants to do to Georgia, stop the run, that's what Georgia's going to want to do as well. Just make Jalen throw as much as possible, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think these game plans actually kind of match up with each other when you look at what these teams are both good at. They're both good at running the ball. They're both very physical offensive lines. They have a great stable of running backs. And so whoever can step up to the plate on the front 7 on that defensive side of the ball, I think that's who really starts to favor in this matchup. I don't know that Alabama's running game right now is as good as it has been in the past. And so I think that Georgia really, they match up well with what you're trying to do. They have a ton of speed defensively. They will be able to put a guy like Roquan on Jalen Hurts and track him down. I think that right now you have to hope that Alabama's offensive line has the same game that they had last week. Just really being able to shove it up the middle. Follow those double teams. Allow Damien Harris to poke his head in and out and really fall forward. And that has to be the blueprint, I think, for what Brian Daboll's trying to do this weekend.
Well, the elephant in the room, of course, is the question mark at linebackers and the injuries is there. That's making me go over here to our comment section where I see my buddy, the Ben George, is watching. He's here in town from Tuscaloosa covering the game. Hey, Ben. But we do have a question from Doug Edge Sr. says, what's the depth looking like and how worried are you at that position?
Yeah, well, listen, I don't think that Alabama can't have any injuries in this game. I think that when you look at Mack Wilson, the fact that Dylan Moses already went out during bowl practice, Mack Wilson obviously has been nicked up all year, played a huge game in that game against Clemson last week to return the pick six touchdown from the linebacker position. They can't afford any more injuries, though. When you talk about Terrell Lewis and Christian Miller getting a ton of snaps out wide, you're going to have Jamie Mosley also in there providing depth. But if Mack Wilson goes down, if Rashaan Evans goes down, you're looking at a guy like Keith Holcomb, who a lot of people didn't think played very well against Mississippi State early in the year, but is an older guy. I don't think he really fits in well against the scheme. I think that if Keith Holcomb has to come in the game, that Jim Chaney kind of puts him in the crosshairs. All of a sudden you want him to line up on some of these guys one-on-one out of the backfield. So they just can't afford any injuries at the second level. The linebacker positions, the pass rush positions, those right now are at a premium for Alabama. If one of them goes down, it's going to be tough to climb back from, in my opinion.
Keep the questions and comments rolling in. Mary Louise Sanders says, who has the better secondary in this game?
I think it's Alabama, and I don't think it's just because of the starters. I think the depth that Alabama brings to the table. And obviously they lost a guy like Hootie Jones, but when you look at how Deontay Thompson played, and really his first big game action last week, I thought he played extremely well. The Georgia secondary, they have had a decent year, but I think this is the one spot that you look at this defense and think at times they can be had. Dominic Sanders has had a great career. DeAndre Baker is another guy that you feel like can match up one-on-one, but the depth, once you start to go to nickel, once you start to go to dime, I think you feel good if you're Alabama about the way some of your younger wide receivers match up on some of these corners. I think that Alabama right now, there's 5 or 6 guys in the rotation they feel pretty good about in the secondary. Long, fast guys that can cover up some of what Georgia's doing. So Alabama gets the check mark in the secondary, in my opinion, in a big way.
Tommy Zadik says, who's the guy talking? That's Mike Johnson, former All-American. He played for Alabama, 2009, captain on that national championship team. I'm Hannah Chalker, and we want to hear from you guys, so keep the comments rolling. And we're having a lot of predictions. You see these predictions on
Yeah, I'm
your
seeing some of them. And some of y'all are feeling really good.
Yeah.
Y'all are making me feel better than I was feeling at the beginning of the day. You see a 31-10. I saw a 42-10 earlier. A lot of people think that Bama, runs away. And we talked about second half adjustments earlier. And I think that really is a big key, that if Bama can grab a lead in the first half and maybe go into halftime up with a 14-7 score or a 21-7 score, that's where they're comfortable. I think that Alabama is comfortable in that position, because then you get in the second half, then you have a look at what Georgia did defensively in the first half, and then maybe you put together a 10-minute drive, a 12-minute drive, really start to salt away that clock, because it's up to Georgia to score touchdowns. And so that's always been the blueprint through Nick Saban. It's just tough to do in games like this, and so you have to hope that Bama goes up in the second quarter and can go into halftime with the lead.
We'll take a few more comments here. Doug Edge Sr. once again. Thanks, Doug, for tuning in, and thanks for your questions. He says, how does the Georgia kicking game match Bama's? And we talked about this on yesterday's show, but again, just what your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think Rodrigo Blankenship gives them the edge in the place kicking game. Andy Papanassos has done a decent job this year. I think that he was the right guy in the right situation for Bama, transferring over from Ole Miss, and they needed a kicker this year. But then you start to line up against Rodrigo Blankenship, has really been the ace in the hole all year. Was awarded a scholarship early on in the year from Kirby Smart. Everybody saw that video start to go viral. That's been a big topic of discussion for them moving forward. But then, listen, you flip it over to the punting game. I think these punters are both extremely good. I know Georgia's punter finished like top 8 in the nation. And J.K. Scott has been a finalist every year for the Ray Guy Award. And so when you start to match up special teams, return units, I think that all those things start to mesh in together. It's all going to be about what they'll be able to do Monday night. I don't think the past has anything to do with what you're going to see on the special teams coverage units, but I had to give it a toss-up. I don't know that Bama or Georgia really have an edge. I think they both have explosive returners. I think they have a lot of guys that are willing to play a physical brand of football on coverage units, and so we'll see what starts to happen. I don't know that you feel comfortable either way on that one.
A worrisome spot there, maybe not, maybe nothing to even think about, but Blankenship has had to make huge kicks in very dramatic situations. Think back to Oklahoma, the 55-yarder. Papanassos really hasn't had to make any big kicks like that, but both of these teams, very similar situations. they don't really allow a lot of return yards on kickoffs and punts.
Yeah, I think when you look at that, the biggest stat looking at that, the graphic right there is the long of 55, because you really do feel like this is a field position game. I think that, Alabama last week did such a good job in the first half of pinning Clemson deep. Well, all of a sudden, if you can, if you have a kicker like Rodrigo Blankenship, hey, if we can get to the 35-yard line, if we can get to the 38-yard line, you start feeling good about taking a chance that 3 points in this game could be a huge amount of points. Yeah. And so, I don't think Bama's going to get to the 38-yard line and think we're going to trot out Papanastos and see if we can get 3. I think that they'll probably go for some of those fourth down conversions, whereas Georgia, they get to the 35, 38-yard line and say, hey, let's take a shot at this. Papanastos has not drained his long kicks. That 48 you saw in that graphic was actually the punter, J.K. Scott, that nailed one in the Florida State game. So you take that away, and, I think that's a big check mark in Georgia's direction. Now, will he nail all those kicks? It's tough in an atmosphere like that and a guy that's never played in a game like that, but they definitely have the check mark in the right direction.
All right, thanks everybody for watching, and thank you for all of your predictions. Hey, tomorrow's show, it's our last show of this 4-part series. We're going to get all into predictions. We're going to read through all of these. We're going to get Mike's thoughts, and we're also going to show you footage from today's practice. So don't forget, the team is practicing around 2:40 p.m. Eastern time, and we will have some clips from that after. We will also hear from Nick Saban. So you guys are going to want to stick around for that. Final thoughts on show number 3?
Yeah, listen, it's crazy once you start to look at these matchups and look at the athleticism that is all over the field for both sides of these teams. I think that Bama is not used to seeing teams that can really match up athletically. They saw one last week in Clemson. They played well. It's another team rolling in the same way. So just to kind of mark down on some of those matchups you're going to see, they're all pretty favorable athletes when you talk about matchup against the opponent. I think it's going to be a great matchup.
That's Mike Johnson. I'm Hannah Chalker. Don't forget, 1 p.m. Eastern time tomorrow. We're back for our very last show. Mike might be just steaming out of his ears by then with the anxiety.
Yeah, probably so, yeah.
So see us then. This has been Roll Title, the Alabama Championship Special, and head on over to SECCountry.com for all of your national championship needs. We'll see you tomorrow, guys.